coral. And those three corals are the fastest growing corals on the reef. They grow up to this much a year, 15 to 20 centimetres. Then you got ones that look like a rock. Well, they're your boulder corals. Then you have brain coral and honeycomb coral. Those three corals are the slowest growing corals on the reef, only growing between 1 to 3 centimetres a year. So some grow fast, some grow slow. The fast growers tend to be more fragile. The slower ones tend to be more dense and solid. And it is generally your boulder corals are your foundation corals. Once they've established themselves and got large enough, then other corals attach to them, and that is how a new reef starts. Also, to give you a bit more of a heads up about some of the names of the corals. Some of the names of the corals sound like a shopping list. Spaghetti coral. As the brown soft coral is moving around the current, it looks like noodles, hence why we call it spaghetti coral. Cabbage. Surprisingly enough, looks just like one, even green, though I have seen blue and yellow varieties of them. Broccoli. But instead of being an emerald green, it's actually a lime green. And then we also have cauliflower coral. There is a little bit of cauliflower coral just there.
Hello.
Just there's a bit of cauliflower. You can also find mushroom corals. Now, mushroom corals are fairly unique corals. You'll notice all these other corals are growing in close proximity to each other. And at night time, they actually have coral wars where they fight each other for their space, because it's at night time it's when they do their reef building. So they want all the space they can get, so they fight each other for it, except for the mushroom coral. It grows independent from all the other corals, looks like the underneath of a mushroom. And when I mentioned about microscopic coral polyp before, that is not the case with the mushroom coral. If you're looking at a mushroom coral this big, that's one coral polyp. Saw a little bit of that blue just back there. Now let's have a chat about the health of the reef. Who heard about 4 years ago the United Nations come out with some chat that the reef was dead and dying? Anyone remember hearing about that one? No one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, a bit of crowd participation helps. Yeah, so how they were able to do a true survey of the health of the reef if they're doing it from up there, I'm not sure. Because at the same time they're trying to declare it dead and dying, we had a woman marine biologist, scientist, who actually travels up and down the Great Barrier Reef swimming in amongst the corals, and she wrote a report at the same time 4 years ago stating that the northern and central parts of the Great Barrier Reef, we're in the central, it's got the best coral growth it's had in years. Now once I got that bit of information, I delved a bit further into my research. I end up on the AIMS website, which is the Australian Institute of Marine Science, and they stated at that same time 4 years ago that it was the best coral growth we've had in 36 years. That puts a big pay to that dead and dying, doesn't it? And I think initially it was a bit of revenue raising, and they did try to come out with it again a couple of years ago. I heard one news report about it, and then I didn't hear anything more. And that's because our marine biologists and scientists were actually able to prove to them scientifically that it's not dead and dying, it's still alive and it still grows. Has anyone heard about coral spawning? For those who don't know what I'm talking about, that's when the coral does its reproducing. Only happens once a year. And that can happen either in October, November or December. But it seems to happen mainly in November, even though I have seen it happen in December. But it seems to happen in November as it did in November 23 and as it did in November 24. Only about 10 months ago, we had a big coral spawn out here on the reef and around Green Island. It happens about 3 or 4 days after the full moon, but only if the conditions are right. It wants nice flat seas, no wind. The tide's got to be right, and it only happens at night time. And the reason why it only happens at night time, the corals actually wait for the plankton eaters to go to sleep. And then once the diving industry hear there's going to be a coral spawn that night, dive boats come out of the woodwork just to get out to the reefs to watch it in torchlight. And what they'll be watching is the female corals are giving off eggs, the males are giving off spermatoza. It all floats to the surface, creates a slick on the surface of the water that looks a bit like an oil spill, but it's a pink colour. And if you've ever been down to the beach and amongst the rocks on a low tide, you would have noticed a real strong sea smell. Well, that's what that coral spawn smells like. If you're coming out to the reef the day after it's happened, you can smell it for miles. And it's not a putrid smell, just a very strong sea smell. Now they're not the only creatures spawning. Giant clams, all your other shellfish and mollusks, sea stars, or you may know them as starfish, sea cucumbers, which are a sausage looking creature you may see every so often on the sandy patches. But when we see the males stand up on their tails, that is the precursor of the coral spawn about to happen. So in amongst all that soup of all that spawn of all those other creatures, they find their own kind. As the staghorn coral polyp larvae will only breed with the staghorn coral polyp larvae. So once they've found their mate and got it together, they'll either drift on down and continue the colony they came from, or they may drift around for a period of time and find their own spot and wish to start their own colony. Now the reasons why I mentioned the coral spawn, just to let you know only live corals do it, not dead and dying ones. But that's not to say the coral doesn't have its problems. You may have heard about coral bleaching.
Yeah.
And what happens, generally when we talk about coral bleaching, it's normally to do with a marine heat wave. In other words, the water's too warm. Now the corals prefer water temperature between 21 to 30 degrees Celsius. When it goes 1 degree above 30, the corals stress. And that's why it should actually be called coral stressing, not coral bleaching. And the reason why they're stressing, when the water gets too warm, that algae that's living with the coral polyp, it starts to produce a toxin. And that is poisonous to the coral polyp. So to save itself, it ejects all the algae from within it, and all the coral goes white. And that is where the expression coral bleaching comes from. But the expression coral bleaching gives people the wrong impression. Many people think and believe that when they hear about coral bleaching, that the coral's dead. And I'll probably hazard a guess that some of you thought the same thing. Well, that's where the United Nations made their mistake. Flying over these bleached reefs and declaring they were dead and dying because they believe the bleached coral is dead. It's not dead, it's still alive. It can remain alive in that state up to 4 weeks. And if you remember rightly, I mentioned it's got tentacles, so it can still derive some food in that time. But if it goes beyond the 4 week time period, yeah, more than likely the corals will die